to Satanism from this, because Wicca will deny the existence of Satan. They will say that he's a Christian thing, that there's nothing, that they don't believe in the devil. And for some of them, that might be true. But as I like to tell these people, just because you don't believe in the devil doesn't mean he doesn't believe in you.
Hello my friends, so before we get into this video, I want to give a shout out to 3 channels that I highly recommend. The first one is Foolish Fish. This is a great channel for the study of the occult for those new and old and everyone in between. Second one is Esoterica. This channel goes deeper in history and veracity of various studies, especially the Kabbalah and other things esoteric. Angela's Symposium. Angela has some great information about witchcraft, paganism, shamanism, magic, esotericism, and all things occult. I highly recommend these channels for anyone interested in learning more about the broader esoteric and Western occultism. With that out of the way, let's get into this week's video. So I came across this video by our old friend Mr. Bill, I was a vampire who lived off human blood for 18 months, Schnobelen. For those unfamiliar with Mr. BS, let me give you a brief synopsis of his background.
It just really bothered me, when I was listening to that podcast earlier today with old Doc Bill there. It was just where is he getting half of this stuff?
For the listeners, I think it was episode 84 or 85 with Dr. Bill Schnobelen. He claims to have been a Freemasonic vampire, wizard, warlock, all sorts of things. Yeah. So that's what we're talking about when we say Dr. Bill. So just so people know, if you want to go check that out.
He seemed a little deluded on a few things.
He claims to have been a Catholic priest, a Mormon, a Freemason, a Druid, voodoo priest, witch, Satanist, Luciferian, an actual member of the Illuminati, even though I never saw him at any of our monthly bingo games. And of course, he claims he was an actual vampire who lived off human blood for 18 months. Yes, he actually said this.
I had to choose. I could either go one way and become a lycanthrope or a werewolf, or I could go the other way and become a vampire. And I chose to become a vampire because it seemed, sexier somehow. And so anyhow, I went through about a year and a half where basically I lived on nothing but human blood and Catholic communion wafers. That's all I ate.
In this video, our Jack of all religions is educating his audience on Wicca, Path of Shadows. So pour yourself a glass of typo negative and kick back and enjoy some tricks, because we are in for a real treat. I hope you enjoy.
This is Dr. William Schnobelen.
Doctor, Bill, your own website reads you earned a Master's in Theological Studies degree in 1980 and a Master of Arts degree in Counseling in 1990. You acquired a doctorate in Naturopathic Medicine. Why didn't you add your BS in spreading BS? As an ND, what type of medical care are you able to provide? 1. Remove obstacles to health, stimulate the healing process, strengthen the immune system, correct structural integrity, use natural substances to restore and regenerate, use pharmacological substances, well, you know about that, to halt progressive pathology. Holy crap, you can prescribe drugs to people? Oh, only if you have a state license to do so. Use high force, invasive modalities, surgeries, radiation, chemotherapy. When life, limb, or function must be preserved, NDs refer patients to MDs who are expertly trained in these arenas. At the same time, NDs use complementary or supportive therapies to decrease side effects and increase the effectiveness of these invasive procedures. So, basically, you can do anything that anybody else can who eats healthy, exercises, and takes care of themselves. Any other serious issues, they should see a real doctor, an MD.
And this time we're talking in the area of apologetics, defending the faith, if you will, against other systems of religion that are not true.
Apologetics, huh? What is it about Wicca that threatens your religious doctrine? Is it that The Wicca don't believe in your particular religious views? If so, why don't you defend your religion from any of the other religions in the entire world that also do not follow your particular religious views?
I felt led that because we're now in the month of October, which
I'm guessing by that sarcastic grunt that you are not a fan of October.
unfortunately has come to be known as a very witchy kind of month.
Wait, October is a witchy month? Well, it does end in the Catholic-based but now secular holiday of Halloween, but I think most people who consider October a witchy month are, well, other witches. Just like Christmas conjures up images of baby cheeses.
Wicca is a term that's used. It's more well-known now than it was back when I was involved in it.
Yes, and believe me, we are also very pleased that you found your calling elsewhere, far, far, far away from us. We are very happy for you. Just please stay at least 100 yards away from us at all times.
For so-called white witchcraft.
If you say so, Billy Boy. By the way, white and black magic are overly simplistic terms that are falling out of favor.
In other words, witchcraft that is morally good, quote unquote.
Please explain more about my beliefs. Afterwards, I'll explain your religion to you, Bill. After all, I've flipped through the Bible a few times, so by your standards, I'm an expert.
Wiccans don't believe in cursing people necessarily.
We don't believe in cursing people? It really depends on the individual witch. Now, you and your friends like to scare others about us, that witches are running around cursing livestock and making men's penises fall off. Yes, they actually believed this back in the 15th century, when in reality we are busy organizing Sabbats, reading books, buying trinkets, making incense, cleaning dried candle wax off our clothes, etc. I know, I make it sound so exciting. Did I mention reading books? Lots and lots of books.
They don't believe in, doing human sacrifices or...
Yes, Bill, we are opposed to murder. We also are not in favor of kicking puppies.
anything that is illegal, other than, of course, they might use drugs.
Only the ones you prescribe to us, Doc.
We used our share of drugs back in the 70s, and most witches do, even though they kind of deny it.
I think you are conflating the culture of the late 60s and 70s with modern witchcraft. Yes, I am sure there are witches who ingest illegal substances. There are also many witches, including myself, that do not use illegal drugs, either in practice or recreational. Decisions like this are left to the individual witch or group. I've been in groups that don't even use alcohol. Bill, you took a lot of drugs during your excursion into Wicca. It doesn't mean that all Wicca do.
Things have changed a lot. I got saved out of Wicca in 1984.
Yes, and we are so happy for us. You. We are so happy for you, Bill.
And obviously that's a long, long time ago, but still, I've kind of kept my finger on the pulse of things.
Bill, I do not consent. Keep your creepy fingers on your own pulse. You had the same problem back in your Wicca phase. Did you ever stop being a sexual predator?
Partly because you need to know about it, but also because the church needs to be aware of the dangers of this, and for the most part, they aren't.
That's because there is no danger. Bill, your penis will not fall off. And if it does, I don't know anything about it.
Witches are supposedly good. They do tend to view, quote-unquote, fundamentalist Christians as foes.
I don't see Christian fundamentalists as foes. What makes you say this, Bill? Did some fundamentalist Christian's penis fall off? If it did, I don't know anything about that either.
And so there is danger there, and we need to address this.
You need to protect your penis. Okay, I'm sorry for all the penis jokes. Penis jokes can be hard to deliver. Most of the time they fall flaccid. Okay, now I'm done. Penis.
The word Wicca, which is it's actually originally pronounced Wicca in Old English. And you can look all this up in the Oxford English Dictionary. But it means something that is bent or twisted.
This tactic of sprinkling misconceptions in with accurate information is not lost on me. It's exactly what Alex Jones does. You slip in lies and sandwich them between interesting facts.
And that being the idea that basically witchcraft is a bent or twisted religion.
And no, I'm not going to make a joke about you-know-what being bent or twisted. Bill, you might want to update your script. From etymologyonline.com. OED says of uncertain origin. Lieberman says none of the proposed etymologies of which is free from phonetic or semantic difficulties. Klein suggests connection with Old English wiggle, divination, and wig, we, idol. Watkins says the nouns represent a Proto-Germanic wick-jazz necromancer, one who wakes the dead, from Proto-Indo-European weg yo, from Proto-Indo-European root weg, to be strong, be lively. All links will be in the description box below.
Since the 1950s, there has been an effort made to kind of redefine that as meaning, a wise one. They will say Wicca is the craft of the wise. Well, there's really not much linguistic, historical warrant for that. But you know how these people are.
Both of those etymologies have been passed around and later corrected. Wick with wicker for the bent, twisted, and the root wiz for wizard, wise. Our understanding of Proto-Indo-European linguistics is an ever-evolving process, and many of us adapt or abandon terms accordingly. That's one of the reasons we spend more time reading and less time cursing livestock and making your you-know-what fall off.
So in any event, Wicca is generally defined as a nature religion. It is polytheistic, meaning it believes in many gods.
Nature religion, polytheistic. Well, at least they aren't kicking puppies, right?
When I was around in it, there were like maybe 5 or 6 what were called traditions. And with the exception of maybe one, they all kind of believed kind of the same thing.
And what would these beliefs be, Bill? I mean, don't go soft on me.
And anyway, they believe in a goddess and a god. And usually the goddess is considered to be superior.
Superior? No. In all Wiccan-based covens, the high priest is said to be first among equals.
So it's considered to be a matriarchal religion as opposed to the patriarchy. And so that's a critical thing. The goddess is seen as being this threefold moon kind of goddess figure, the waxing moon, the waning moon, and the new moon. And then her horned god consort is like secondary. And these deities have numerous names. She is known as Diana or Radia, or, there's literally dozens of names for both the goddess and the god. The god, many people call him Lucifer, interestingly enough, because she's a moon goddess and he is a sun god. So I don't want to get too deep into this.
You don't want to get too deep into this? But that's what your audience is here for, Bill. There are many god names used in various traditions, and some use the mistranslation of the morning star.
They are pagan, obviously. They don't accept the Bible. A handful of them might respect Jesus and believe in some sort of weird, vague New Age Christianity, but that would be the exception.
Many witches and pagans that I know try and respect the Bible and what Christians believe, while others may not. Personally, I try to be respectful of Christians and their Bible, but I don't believe in it. You may struggle with this in your own life, but I have no problem with Christians or really any religion, except extremism. Violent extremism in any form, I am vehemently opposed to. If this still troubles you, Bill, don't worry. We live in a country where you and my religious beliefs are protected under the First Amendment.
So their basic rule, and yeah, they do have a rule. It's called the Wiccan Reed, and it says 8 words the Wiccan Reed fulfill, and you harm none, do what ye will. In other words, as long as you don't hurt anybody else, you can do whatever you want. That's their ethical standard. And of course, as we all understand, it's kind of deficient.
It's not a rule, it's a guideline. Like many occult axioms, it is meant as a guiding bit of wisdom for the witch to do with as they please. And it is not an ethical standard. It may be part of an individual's ethics, but it's not a standard. The witches and pagans that I know have high ethical standards, but this is most likely molded by philosophy, culture, society, and their upbringing. What you just quoted is from a poem written by Dorian Valiente in 1964. 8 words the witch's creed fulfill. If it harms none, do what you will, which was later copied by another author who changed the word creed to Reed. Gerald Gardner, who is regarded as the father of modern Wicca, in his 1959 book, The Meaning of Witchcraft, Chapter 8, Magical Thinking, continued, Gardner wrote this: "It is an old saying that the difference between orthodoxy and heterodoxy is that orthodoxy is my doxy and heterodoxy is someone else's doxy. John Calvin's doxy, a most ill-favored hag, was embodied in his famous dictum, 'All pleasure is sin.' Nowadays, most people modify that a little, saying, 'My pleasure are innocent, everybody else's pleasures are sin.' Witches cannot sympathize with this mentality. They are inclined to the morality of the legendary good King Paschal. Do what you like, so long as you harm none. But they believe a certain law to be important. You must not use magic for anything that will cause harm to anyone. And if to prevent a greater wrong being done, you must discommode someone, you must do it only in a way which abates the harm. This involves every magical action being discussed first, to see that it can do no damage. And this induces a habit of mind to consider well the results of one's actions, especially upon others. This, you may say, is elementary Christianity. Of course it is. It is also elementary Buddhism, Hinduism, Confucianism, and Judaism, to name only a few. So many gods, so many creeds, so many paths that wind and wind, when just the art of being kind is all that the world needs. You might want to get a better grip than just a finger on the pulse of Wicca.
So most of these groups also practice some sort of magic. They might do divination, they might do spells, they might do, other forms of fortune telling, things of that nature. And some of them are, in fact, are deeply involved in high magic, ceremonial magic, stuff like that, which is much more complex. I personally was initiated first into the Algard tradition and then into the Alexandrian tradition of Wicca.
This is true. You were initiated into an Alexandrian coven in Boston in 1973. You stayed for a very short time and your training was lacking. I have done several videos on Mr. BS, and the Algard tradition was attempted in New York.
But anyway, there is some variety in all of this. Now, the other thing to understand is, especially nowadays, it's easier to understand Wicca as a kind of subgroup of a larger New Age movement, because that's really kind of what it is. Even though the term New Age really is only maybe 30 or 40 years old, and Wicca's been around a lot longer than that, but it kind of fits into that category because it has many of the same characteristics, including the love of the occult that you will see in the New Age movement.
No, Wicca and the occult have nothing to do with New Age. Some people who are into New Age movement may incorporate various past traditions into a blended blended tradition, but that would be the exception. The Western occult or esoteric tradition predates Wicca, and Wicca definitely has its roots in the occult esoteric tradition. It is easy for outsiders to associate these things together out of convenience, but they are actually separate and distinct.
In my personal case, I got into it because I had a professor in minor seminary that told me that Jesus, was a witch.
Bullshit. You had a professor at seminary who told you Jesus was a witch, and you believed him, without question. You know what? Maybe I shouldn't be so distrusting of you. Maybe you are just really gullible.
But he told me I needed to study the occult. Now, that might sound remarkable to you, as it did to me as an 18-year-old devout Catholic boy who wanted to be a priest.
No, it doesn't sound remarkable. It sounds like you were remarkably gullible.
But I went out dutifully and studied the occult, and I found a couple of obviously there was no internet. We're talking like 1968 here. But I did get a hold of the King of the Witches over in London, and he directed me to a couple of covens, and I was initiated first in 1969, where I was made a priest of Wicca, And then later on, I got involved with the Alexandrian group that was in the Plymouth, Boston area, Massachusetts. And there I was made a priest and then eventually second and third degree, which is high priest.
Mr. B.S., Alexander's was given the name King of the Witches by his followers and the media. There is no King of the Witches title. Alex himself at first embraced it and later rejected it. Also, the tradition started by Alex is the Alexandrian tradition. Did Alex tell you if you wanted to learn about Wicca that you should go study Catholicism? I mean, after all, Jesus was a witch.
And then I went back and started up covens.
I feel so bad for anyone who is initiated by you. Some of the stories I have read from Frater Barabas's blog, which, by the way, I highly recommend, but should you read his accounts of being a member of Dr. B.S.'s cult of insanity, I suggest keeping a bucket nearby because he holds nothing back. There is a link to Frater's blog below.
And the thing that happened to me, that happens to a lot of people, is that gradually I got drawn into Satanism.
You chose to get into Satanism. It's not what everybody does. There are plenty of witches that didn't get into Satanism, and there are plenty of Satanists who never got into Wicca. You have absolutely no convictions, no honor, or basic respect for others. You used and abused your friends like a junkie in need of a fix. All the choices you made were your own, Bill.
From this, because Wicca will deny the existence of Satan. They will say that he's a Christian thing, that there's nothing, that they don't believe in the devil. And for some of them, that might be true.
I cannot say with 100% certainty that all Wiccans don't believe in the Christian Satan, because there's always one person who will, and they will comment below, and then I will tell them they are stupid and don't understand their own history. They'll get all mad and ask me who the hell I am to gatekeep Wicca, and then we'll spend hours typing back and forth, wasting our time and never changing the other person's mind. So I'll save myself the headache and put that caveat in the video. By the way, we are still waiting for credit for creating the look of your devil. You stole the hooves and horns from the Greek god Pan. Could we at least get a little nod?
But as I like to tell these people, just because you don't believe in the devil doesn't mean he doesn't believe in you.
It's not that the devil doesn't believe I exist. It's just that the devil doesn't have enough convincing evidence to believe that I exist. He is an Aleister.
And he's after you, big time. And I found that out the hard way. But in my case, I was drawn into first the Church of Satan.
I thought you were first drawn to Catholicism, then the occult per your professor, and then Wicca.
By a friend of mine who was the owner of an occult bookstore. He gave me a copy of the Satanic Bible, and away I went.
You got a copy of the Satanic Bible from an occult bookstore? Wow. What a shocker. What are the odds?
And then, later on I got involved in hardcore Satanism, which is some pretty awful stuff. I don't want to get into it right now.
Hardcore Satanism? Is that the hardcore Satanism brought about by playing Dungeons and Dragons, or listening to heavy metal music, or being falsely accused of child abuse and spending 20 years in jail, even though you're 100% innocent? That kind of hardcore Satanism? The 1990s Satanic Panic hardcore Satanism? Bill, at this rate, you are never going to get your little Johnson reattached.
Because I don't want to give the impression that most Wiccans do not do nasty things, except, of course, worship false gods. They're idolaters.
Not only are we idolaters, but we'll steal your woody.
But they don't like kill babies or kill animals or, do all these things we see, Satanists being accused of doing.
You mean like the things that witches in the 15th century were accused of doing? Did he say what I think he said? Holy crap, Bill. Are you becoming an honest man? I gotta hear that again.
Satanists being accused of doing.
Accused of doing? Yes. They are only accusations. I guess me bringing attention to Exodus 20:16 finally got to you, huh?
Witches like to say they are the oldest religion. And that's not really true. Because, down through the centuries, through the millennia, all the way back to the days of the Tower of Babel, there were magicians, there were occultists, but they were more like Satanists than witches.
I haven't come across any evidence to suggest that modern Wicca is older than 1939. The single best public Book of Shadows, co-authored by Doreen Valiente and Gerald Gardner, was published in the books 8 Sabbaths for Witches and The Witch's Way by Janet Stewart Farrar, suggesting that some of the material Gardner may have copied from older occult sources. Those sources can be traced back to about the 15th century. That is about where the trail ends. Hopefully, scholars will get more definitive answers one day. There were no witches, occultists, or Satanists back in the time when the Bible was written.
The idea of a Wiccan, in the sense that, you know, these people are thinking about it today, is radically different from anything that was around. Believe me, I studied this thing through.
So radically different that they are not even close to one another.
And even Wiccan writers, Wiccan scholars, and yes, there are serious Wiccan scholars like Margot Adler, they admit that basically the idea of white witchcraft and Wicca as it is now constituted since the 1950s wasn't really around that much before the dawn of the 20th century.
Sorry, I just threw up a little hearing Mr. BS speak the name of Margot Adler. Margot Adler is the extreme polar opposite of you, Willie. She was honest, she had integrity, and she was respected, and she didn't use and abuse others for her own personal gain.
And there were these 2 or 3 seminal figures that kind of brought it out. One was an old coot out in the forests of England named George Pickengill, who was a Mason. He was a Freemason, but he also claimed to be a hereditary witch.
Oh my fucking... How long is this video? Maybe one day I will go on a deeper discussion of this very controversial and elusive figure.
And he brought in another guy who was also a Freemason and initiated him, and his name was Gerald Gardner.
Gerald Gardner, yes, he was a co-Mason.
And it's Gerald Gardner that basically started what came to be known as the Wiccan Revival.
You mean the start of modern Wicca?
And in 1951 in England, they repealed the Witchcraft Act. There was an act that if you were found practicing witchcraft, you would be sent to prison.
Before 1951, witches got a stiff penalty for stealing wangs.
And that was taken off the books, and so, as they say, the witches came out of the broom closet. And they did so with a vengeance.
With a vengeance? I'm not sure if you understand what coming out of the closet means. During the 1940s through 60s, witches risked losing their livelihoods. Even today, some witches have genuine fears of losing their business or suffering violence. Although I often reference the witch craze in Europe and America during the 15th through 18th centuries, I understand this is a part of the past. It's our history. I see it more of a warning of how we can do horrific evil in the name of making a better world, how we can become that which we fear or hate. I don't bring this to the surface to try and seek vengeance. Those people who did that are long dead and gone. We learn, we grow, and we move on. And hopefully we have learned from our past. This can happen to any group of people, be they religious, social groups, racial identity, or political affiliation.
And so books were written, and this was all happening in the 50s and in the early 60s. And anyhow, that's basically, where it got started. Now, the other influence in all this, and this name I'm sure probably many of you know, was Aleister Crowley. He knew Gardner, and Gardner and Crowley, put together this Book of Shadows, which is kind of like a Wiccan spell book / Bible / ritual book. And they claimed, it's centuries old. Well, no, it wasn't, because Crowley wrote half of it.
Gardner used much of Crowley's material and rituals, too, as Gardner put it, to fill in the blanks of his Book of Shadows. Later, Doreen rewrote much of the included material. Crowley did not write nor co-author Gardner's Book of Shadows.
And there's a lot of kind of quasi-Masonic stuff in it, because both Crowley and Gardner were Masons. You can see that if you're both a Mason and a Wiccan, like I was, you'll see immediately the commonalities.
He just can't help himself. He has to tie in the Masons. He's filling up his evangelical bingo card.
Crowley was like one of the evilest occult figures of the 20th century, if not the most evil. But he had his hand in all this, and we're going to talk about that later.
Aleister Crowley was, and still is, a very controversial figure, even in Western occultism today. Unfortunately, there is more rumor than truth spread about him. Of all the magical groups of his day, Wicca was among the few that Crowley was not interested in. I've done a video on the development of Wicca. I'll link below and put a card up here.